How fast is too fast? Betting the ranch on technology adoption. So we all here are technology adopters, and we're also analysts of technology. Communications is a business driven by technology change and investment therein. But new technology adoption is a double-edged sword because of the risk inherent of being first to market. Remember now that we know who the pioneers are because they have arrows in their backs. Demand for HD TV is booming on the one hand, but the terrestrial internet is a serious player even though it's low definition or even possibly medium definition. But it offers much of its services on demand. IPTV is a new distribution channel and a technology upgrade for cable systems. But the dominant IPTV providers tend towards fiber optics for program contribution and distribution. Then we have digital signage and digital cinema. How many people have some involvement with digital signage or interest? Okay, very good. And the other one was digital cinema. Have you been to a digital cinema lately? I got some nods of yes. So they look like attractive markets, but when will adoption reach a meaningful level? Two-way broadband satellite links, and we have some key players on this panel in that field, are the mainstay of many corporations involved in retail and oil and gas, emergency communications, and of course the U.S. military, a heavy user. But can it deliver an attractive proposition to consumers? Finally, the economy is challenged by credit restrictions and looming price inflation. Yet, the financial community acknowledges the strength of the satellite industry, as spoken yesterday at the Financial Forum. In this panel, techno-savvy executives debate the push and pull of technology option and offer their forecasts for change. This will be a combination of Q&A and discussion based on issues raised by the panelists and you in the audience. So let me just run down our executive panel of movers and shakers. They cover all aspects of the technology involved in our industry and its relationship to business. That's a key point. And they're in several key sectors. So I'm just going to introduce each of them. First, we have Roger Franklin, immediately to my left. He's president and CEO and owner of Crystal Computer Corporation, a leading supplier of content control system technologies for the broadcast and satellite industries. And incidentally, their products are found in major teleports. Crystal's innovative solutions give companies visibility into the status, performance, and health of their content distribution infrastructure. In addition, Crystal can help combine the latest technology with legacy applications. Those are so hard to get your control of. And the key thing is to be able to tie that into the new infrastructure, and that extends the life of existing infrastructure. Customers include News Corp, Fox, I saw that system, Time Warner, CNN, Disney, ESPN, ABC, PBS, and SES Americom. Some all very important users of Crystal technology. Mr. Franklin has background as a software engineer and has been involved with Crystal since its founding 23 years ago. He holds a BS in Applied Mathematics from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Okay, Andy Lucas, President, Global Connectivity Services Manager of Schlumberger. The business focus of GCS is providing to the oil and gas industry the highest quality communication solutions, including ViaSat, wireless, and fiber. This role involves the direction and management of product and business development, marketing, resource management, bid support, and constructing operational systems and business processes. So in other words, Andy makes it happen. Andy also oversees the 11 teleports, as if that wasn't enough, Schlumberger, that they operate on a global basis, as well as the manufacturing of Schlumberger stabilized ViaSat antenna systems known as SpaceTrack. He is an electrical and electronic engineer from the Dundee College of Technology and has been involved in telecommunications services for the oil and gas industry for 20 years. So if you want to know anything about oil and gas, here's the guy. Okay, Bryan McGuirk, North American Satellite Services, SES Americom. Bryan is responsible for building and maintaining SES Americom's leadership in media and entertainment distribution throughout the U.S. using, of course, the AMC satellites. Mr. McGuirk's team provides high-quality satellite-based service solutions to varied commercial, industrial, and enterprise customers in North American markets. He held executive positions with OpenTV, TVI Fusion, NBC Television Network, I think we've heard of that, in both the affiliate relations and NBC Asia and Turner International, launching TNT, and Cartoon Network in Asian markets. Mr. McGuirk received his BA in Managerial Economics from Union College in Schenectady, New York, and his MBA from Emory University in Atlanta. We have Tom Moore, President, ViaSat Holdings, which is the ViaSat 1, Ka-band broadband satellite initiative of ViaSat Inc. Tom spent much of his career involved in the development of video, voice, and data broadband technology for the satellite, wireless, and cable industries. Until joining ViaSat, Mr. Moore was a principal at Times Arrow, a venture investing firm. And from, here's the key thing, 1998 until 2005, he served as president, CEO of Wild Blue, and remains on the company's board. A co-founder of Wild Blue, he was instrumental in bringing DOCSIS cable modem technology to the satellite world. And prior to that, he basically put DOCSIS together while at Cable Labs. He holds a master's degree in telecommunications engineering from the University of Colorado and a Harvard MBA. And Ned Mountain, president and COO of WEGENER. Ned has been with WEGENER for the past 25 years, serving in numerous domestic and international sales, marketing, and management positions. He's been a member of the NCTA, that's the National Cable Television Association, the Engineering Committee, and served as co-chair of the Quality Sound Committee. He's been involved in numerous cable-related projects, including the satellite digital network control system used by major programmers, and here we are, again, Fox. So he's on the transmission side of Fox's network. Prior to joining WEGENER, Mr. Mountain's prior experience included corporate senior vice president with UA Columbia Cablevision and a systems engineering manager for Motorola Communications. He has a BSEE from the University of Pittsburgh. And David Szelag, Vice President Technical Operations of GlobeCast America. Dave has 27 years of experience in engineering and IT and has been with GlobeCast since the company's founding in 1997. Among his accomplishments are the architecture of World TV, an international bouquet of over 200 channels, the design and implementation of GlobeCast's super head-end and remote head-end applications for transmission of content for IPTV applications, as well as the upgrade of the North American portion of GlobeCast's fiber network. Overall, his team manages over 11 million minutes of transmission per month. So that's our panel. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of where they're coming from and what they can offer us in this discussion. So I have some questions that I can start off with, and then we'll take them from the floor. And the first one I'd like each panelist to comment on, beginning with Roger. And what is the hottest technology in your segment? What is the next best alternative? That's what the marketing people want to know, satellite or terrestrial. And lastly, how do they compare?
The segment where I come from is commercial television. That's the primary segment I'm in. HD TV is still hot. A lot of customers are moving full steam ahead with HD TV. Personally, I'm not sure if that's where they need to be in 2 years' time. The IPTV, the distribution of their content to the consumer, wherever the consumer is, in whatever format the consumer needs to receive it in, is, I think that's where the future of the commercial television market will be. Between satellite and fiber, the bottom line is whatever it takes to get it there. There's the terrestrial networks obviously have lower bandwidth capacity at this time. But if you're transmitting video to a cell phone, you don't need a whole lot of bandwidth. And the consumer might be okay with that. So it depends on what the consumer is willing to accept. But right now we do know that they want to see television wherever they are, not necessarily in the highest quality.
That's a very interesting observation. Okay, and let me ask Andy, in your sector, what your hottest technology is.
So not so much a technology perhaps, but an operational demand, so a technique. So oil and gas is unusual with respect to the pace of the field operation, the mobility requirements that results in, and also the absolute demand for very simple to use equipment dumbed down as far as possible. So untrained, unskilled individuals can actually self-commission ViaSats, for example. So not so much the technology, but for me, key drivers in the marketplace today, as we see it within oil and gas, are the need for simple-to-use, highly mobile, highly robust equipment, but most importantly, actually integrated into the application environment itself, such as remote management techniques. And that spills into the need for the service, the integrated service, to be highly supportable, but also highly available. Our customers routinely demand 100% availability, which is a challenge, but when understood, we appreciate that it's 100% availability at the right time. In other words, at that critical moment, it absolutely must work. So for me, as I say, it's not so much about what's the hottest technology, it's about the techniques. The techniques are demanding, and the overall solution involving every aspect, from the technology to the operational model, to the training, to the mobility, to the robustness, and to the integration application is really the critical aspect.
Okay, very good. And Bryan?
I come from the media space, and in media today, if you talk to any of the networks, clearly one of the things that will come up is video over broadband. So I did a little research to see how hot is it really, and I was surprised. Nielsen actually does rate how many minutes you do different activities, and the most recent Nielsen numbers show that linear TV in your home more than 285 million customers are watching it monthly, and they're watching it for 151 minutes a month. That's not unique in itself, but it is up 6 minutes over the prior year. So from fourth quarter 2008 to 2007, it's increasing. On the internet side, you've got 161 million customers using it for only 27 minutes a month, and it's only up 1 minute year over year. So actually TV, linear television is the hot spot if you look at our market. So that's my surprise.
Well, that's a surprise and no surprise at the same time. This may be a nice surprise. Tom, how about in the broadband satellite area?
Yeah, sure. Let me actually, and you introduced me very kindly, but let me make one correction. I have some good friends of mine at Wild Blue in the audience, and I'm no longer on the Wild Blue board. They would not like me to have that uncorrected. We have a wonderful relationship with Wild Blue, and I love my dear friends dearly, but I want to make sure that was corrected. So what are we excited about? What I would say is obviously satellite broadband, and in particular, I think what I would talk about is what I would call second generation broadband, satellite broadband technology. 8-9 years ago, when I was in charge of Wild Blue and we created Wild Blue 1 and NACF2, these were revolutionary satellites, an order of magnitude bigger than anything that had ever flown before. And people asked, how in the world can you create these things? How do you feel about K technology, rain fade, all the kinds of technical questions that come up when you launch something new. But it was necessary for us to deliver a service that we thought was competitive with cable, competitive with DSL. That was 8 to 9 years ago when we at ViaSat early last year, 2008, announced ViaSat 1 in conjunction with Eutelsat and their KSat. We announced 100 gigabit satellite, an order of magnitude bigger than Wild Blue 1 or NACF2. And to me, that is truly the second generation in satellite broadband. But it is a step along the way. Bryan talks about internet video, maybe not growing as quickly as people think, but it is growing. It is growing, and it's growing dramatically. Cisco recently did their second installment of a study where they show that today an average broadband customer consumes, and this is cable, DSL, fiber, satellite, the average customer consumes about 5 gigabytes, of data a month. And they project in the next 3 years that number will either triple or quadruple. Now, what's interesting, I think, about that is that about 2/3 or more of that total capacity 3 or 4 years from now, they project will be either streaming video or large video downloads. So that's a fantastic opportunity for satellite. satellite, one of the drawbacks, obviously, to satellite is overcoming latency, and that's the kind of traffic that is very latency insensitive. So that's not only a nice benefit of that kind of traffic, but it's also a huge, huge challenge for us in the satellite world, is how to deliver that kind of bandwidth cost effectively. So ViaSat 1 is all about a dramatic increase in capacity. What's the next best thing? I think was part of the question. On the terrestrial world, for the market that Wild Blue goes after, that Hughes goes after, that we have targeted for at least a portion of ViaSat 1, on the terrestrial side, terrestrial wireline, be it fiber or copper, in the low density areas, let's say less than 200 homes per square mile, and increasingly 100 homes per square mile, those kinds of wireline terrestrial alternatives literally cost tens of thousands of dollars per home to install. Everybody's heard about broadband stimulus and the fact that we're allocating as a nation $6 to $7 billion to reach the unserved. Well, putting fiber or copper to that unserved community would not be very efficient. That there is tens of thousands of dollars to reach every home. Wireless is also an alternative. 3G or 4G wireless is also an alternative. When you compare the dollars necessary to deliver a megabyte of wireless video or data, you come up with about somewhere between $2 and let's say somewhere between $1 and $3 per megabyte per month. Satellite, such as ViaSat 1, can do that for 1/10 the cost. So I'm not saying that wireless doesn't have a place. We're all very interested in mobility, but in terms of capital efficiency and operating efficiency, we think that satellite for that unserved and exurban market is a dramatic comparable. And so really the next best alternative is what's available today, and that's satellite broadband. And existing satellite broadband. Wild Blue has a phenomenal business, approaching 400,000 subscribers, Hughes roughly the same size, and those are happy subscribers, and yet they don't have the kind of service that would be considered a median cable service today. In fact, a median cable service today across America is around 5 megabits of speed. And I would ask you to go to our booth later on and demo what a satellite link at 5 megabits looks like using an existing satellite. And it's a fairly compelling service. And that is representative of the median service that we plan to offer at ViaSat 1. So that's what I'm excited about. Hopefully we'll spend some more time chatting about that. But that's what we focus on.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Tom. And next is Ned. And Ned, you run a company that provides technology. Why don't you tell us about what you see there?
The hottest technology. Well, I think we serve a very wide range of customers, both on the private network space and the broadcast, professional broadcast space. And what we're seeing is I would say a hot technology is the whole concept of file-based broadcasting. The ability to trickle feed content that does not necessarily need to be there in real time, combined with using that technology to provide more and more localized content and mix it in with live content. So we're seeing a number of file-based broadcast models, both on the professional broadcast side and the private network side. Next best alternative, we're also seeing, I'm not sure exactly if it's that, but we're seeing a lot of customers now interested in a combination of satellite and terrestrial delivery and being able to do things seamlessly. In other words, hybrid networks, where if a customer needs to get into a place that is difficult to serve by satellite, who wants to be able to use an IP connection and have this control system basically run the entire network seamlessly with don't care whether it's satellite technology or internet technology. And surrounding all of this, with the networks we deal with, they're typically ones that require a lot of very complex control, the ability to target things in real time to different single affiliates or groups of affiliates. So the combination of file-based broadcasting, hybrid networks, and network control is what we're seeing evolving and taking off.
Okay, thank you, Ned. And Dave of GlobeCast, you of course buy a lot of this technology, don't you? What do you see as a hot technology?
One of the biggest, the biggest hot technology for us is really the modulation area, the delivery via satellite, the DVB-S2. We've launched recently a number of services to international targets, if you will, using DVB-S2 technology. One of our large... Sorry. One of the more important services that we provide in GlobeCast globally, not only North America but globally, is aggregation and redistribution of international content. Some of the 200 channels that we put together and distribute in North America for expatriates from around the world, and playing along with or in line with Ned's comments, is CDN network and hybrid networks using fiber-based technology as well as satellite. Satellite to get to those hard-to-reach places, and fiber to get to the places that are more accessible and up and coming as far as getting connectivity to them. More and more larger pipes, places that we're building out more and more pipes into other continents of the world, other than where we are today. We have a rather extensive DTN network that reaches most every continent. We don't go to South Pole yet, but we have carbon hubs, and from these hubs we can go satellite for regional distribution from there. Again, with our platforms with international content. For the most part, then it's really hybrid networks and DVB-S2 technology.
Okay, very good, Dave. Let me ask if any panel member has any comment on what anybody else has said. Are we all comfortable? Okay, I have a question related to investing in technology, and this is kind of a financial question since everybody is very sensitive to capital and this sort of thing and getting it. So the question is, how does your business evaluate technology investments using things like return on investment, IRR, revenue gained, new customers, etc., and be as specific as you can? It's open to anybody. Bryan, are you ready?
I'll step up. I have a board member in the audience, so I have to be a little guarded here, folks. I can say that we do measure new projects on an IRR basis, and each of those projects is scrutinized and has to pass the bar. We are a disciplined investor at SES, so that is egalitarian across the group. That said, we do look at strategic investments and value from a strategy point of view as well as the value from a growth point of view. So really taken as a whole, that's how we look at the new project.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to change tapes here. It takes a minute.
We have a very similar situation as SES. Obviously, there's a bar where you have to be this tall to ride that ride, and if you don't meet the minimum criteria, we don't go in that direction. That's kind of the basics. But as far as IRRs on particular technologies, it's really rather customer driven for us. We maybe aren't the forefront out there. We don't have many arrows in our back, as you mentioned earlier. We look for the direction of the marketplace, a number of customers, the right customers, anchor clients, so on and so forth.
Okay, we have some entrepreneurs on the panel here. Do you want to comment about how you make a decision on investing in a new technology? Roger?
Certainly. I like to measure things in customer gains. And I work with these companies as they adopt technology. And one thing that they need to take into consideration when they're working through the formulas is what's the cost of integrating that technology into their existing infrastructure? How much of their existing infrastructure can they maintain and still reach the new tech, or still add on the new technology? there have been a number of organizations where I've been able to assist those customers in bridging the gaps between their current operations, their current infrastructure, and still allow them to adopt new technology at a lesser price. So sometimes it's not all about wholesale replacement. Hey, let's go with this new technology. Let's throw out everything we've done before and start all over. Let's figure out what can we salvage from what we have in our organization today and still adopt the new technology that customers are demanding.
Okay, very good.
So
Tom?
I will jump in. So when ViaSat made the decision to invest, roughly $400 million in ViaSat-1, that was a very difficult decision. Obviously, it not only has to meet stringent return requirements. It is not a rank startup, but it is obviously it is a move into an area which ViaSat has not been in before. So I won't tell you what kind of IRR hurdles are necessary for ViaSat to make that kind of investment, but they're attractive returns. And so that's obviously part of it. But what's actually, I think, been more interesting than that is the fact that by doing that, and this was calculated, I think, on our part, we have done a lot to help stimulate interest and demand for that same kind of program worldwide. When we announced in early 2008, what we were doing with ViaSat-1, at first there was a lot of disbelief. Wow, how in the world, does this even work? Can you really build a 100 gigabit satellite? And for months, we sort of wrestled through that. And even, very, very knowledgeable people in the industry came to us and said, we just don't believe it. We don't believe that you can do, what you say you can do. Over the last 12 months, I think what has happened is we've gone from, wonder, maybe a little bit of disbelief, to verification. Wow, that it really is possible. And that's, interesting the way that you're combining ground infrastructure advancement with satellite advancement to get that kind of capacity. And could we do that? And that's both satellite service providers as well as terrestrial service providers around the world. And so over the last year, I think we've gone through that wonderment to verification. Now we're in the latter stages in many areas of people assessing whether, in fact, this kind of technology could be very helpful to what they're doing in their area. I would throw out Australia as an example. I think everybody to some degree has spent some time thinking about Australia and the National Broadband Network, or the NBN award that is pending in Australia. 12 months ago, the belief was $5 billion we can deliver fiber to 98% of the population. And over the last 12 months, I think the government, along with the folks that have submitted bids, have come to the conclusion that they can't do that for $5 billion. It would take $25 or $30 billion, and still they wouldn't reach 98% of the population. And so to do something that's effective but efficient from a capital perspective to deliver 12 megabits to the whole population, it's going to take wireless, it's going to take fiber, and yes, it's going to take next generation satellite. And so that's just one example. There are all kinds of examples in Asia, Latin America, places like Russia, certainly Europe, although a lot of that analysis was done even before we announced our satellite. So the investment in ViaSat-1 not only is an attractive financial investment for us who have done it, but it's also a very strategic investment, I think, because ViaSat has taken a leadership position in this next generation of satellite broadband, and there's nothing more compelling than leading with your own investment. So, certainly more than just the financial return.
Okay, very good. Let me take a question from the audience. Do we have a microphone?
My voice is probably loud enough.
But we want to get it recorded. That's the only thing. There's no microphone? Okay. Sir, please identify yourself and go ahead.
My name is Ed Ashford. I'm an independent consultant. My question is really for Ned, but it's a two-part question, if I may. I want to make sure I understand the concept of file-based broadcasting, and then ask a question on who's driving it. And I'll give an example. A number of years ago, an operator, which I will not name, did a study on trickle feeding video to home recording devices so that people could play it back later at their will. I mean, not video you get like a TiVo, but recent movies and so forth. And it was turned down finally by the CEO because he felt that the cost of storage on the set-top boxes would be too high. You couldn't get enough movies in there to make it worthwhile. Is that sort of file-based broadcasting you're talking about?
A professional version of that. Yeah, I think if you look at what's happening, the demand for bandwidth is going up. At the same time, the cost of storage is going down, and the reliability of storage media is also going up. So you have the emergence of all this that now allows for the development, and I'm not talking all the way to the home, but to the end broadcast affiliate or cable company to get a file-based, trickle-fed content mechanism to that where it is further operated on before it goes down to the consumer.
Then the basis of my question is, do you see this trickling down to the consumer as well? Because that was what the market was foreseen at that time.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you've got the TiVo, you've got every satellite vendor has their version of that box, and I think what you're going to see is more and more targeted content going all the way to that box, and more reliance on file-based delivery and viewing what you want when you want, as opposed to the linear model and all.
Thank you.
I would just like
to contradict what Bryan said.
I just wanted to comment. Number one, I think file-based delivery still is okay for satellite. We've been delivering on demand, and TVN uses our satellites as well. So on the wholesale side, that's good for business. So there is an actual end game for us. And I do think this is becoming much more of the market in the sense that this month EchoStar will roll out its new sling-based box, which has a terabit of storage on board. That, in contrast to my original TiVo that I got in the year 2000 with 30 hours of storage and 30 megabits, is just a huge difference. So you literally are just leagues away from where we were. And additionally, that sling technology allows you to throw it from your computer to the sling box. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I would just add to that sort of third, the two comments here. In any business plan, I think, where you basically see storage effectively going to zero as part of that business plan, is a good business plan. I talked about satellite broadband and 2 orders of magnitude increase in capacity for essentially the same capital dollars here over the last 12 or so years, and that continuing. So that's a pretty dramatic drop in the cost of bandwidth. In that same time frame, I don't have the figures, but I can guarantee the cost of a unit of storage has decreased by significantly more than that. And easily. A lot more than that. So, we talked a few minutes ago about all this video that is proliferating both IPTV as well as internet video, and whether that's file, downloaded as a file off a site like iTunes, or whether it's the streaming format or some combination thereof. My kids are completely consumed with Hulu. I don't know if you've ever been to Hulu. I'm sure most people have. Particularly if you have teenage kids, I know you have. My son said to me the other day, he loves to watch Office on Hulu, and he said to me, "This can't be legal. I mean, how can I possibly watch Hulu on the internet?" And I said, "Well, did you see that commercial? That's actually how we used to watch television when I was a kid. We had commercials, so it is legal." But he won't go anywhere but Hulu to watch Office anymore. He doesn't watch it on the DVR anymore. He actually watches it on the internet. And that will continue. So one of the things that we're focused on at ViaSat is 2 technologies to make the delivery of that type of streaming content much more affordable. One is micro-caching, putting as much storage as we possibly can in the user device. We've all thought about CDNs, content delivery networks for a long, long time. There's no reason why a large cache can't reside in the home. We have many of them already, and there's no reason why one can't reside in the endpoint of the network and be very efficient as a storage mechanism. 1, and 2, there's no reason why we can't use multicast and other similar efficiency enhancing technologies to deliver that kind of streaming content. So we're very focused on that, and it's all driven by Moore's Law. The fact that storage is becoming effectively free.
Thank you very much.
Very good. I have a question here, and I want to ask this of Andy. since Andy, you're not in the video sector, you're serving a particular kind of end user, but you do have to be very flexible, and you talked about all of the work you do to integrate things together and make it reliable. So what role does R&D play in your adoption of technology, and do you go outside or do you roll your own?
We do both. Schlumberger is well known as being a technology innovator in general, with a long history of 100 years or so of innovation continually. And that innovation is done to achieve maybe a strategic advantage over the competition, address a specific issue. Obviously, with an ROI model in mind, it's robustly managed, but also to enhance efficiency, so save hours on the job, or save minutes on the job, even seconds in some cases can be important. And maybe to address an HSE, health and safety issue perhaps in some cases. But really there's no boundaries to how technology within Schlumberger is developed and assessed. There is a deep, a lot of depth and skill set within the organisation, within the business at large that drives technology innovation. Schlumberger invests above the average in technology in general, but also is constantly doing market technology watch, will acquire, will utilise, will leverage whatever is best fit for the marketplace to suit the actual issue or application in mind. So, video as an example, I think, is an interesting one within the oil and gas world, where, and content distribution in general, which is usually considered from the centre as pushed out to the user. We have to think the other way around, because the content, if you like, is actually being developed at the remote site. So there may be video surveillance at the remote site, there may be large volumes of data being acquired. It has to be delivered back into the centre for the experts, for that oversight, and for the monitoring. So in terms of technology and how we assess it, as I say, considerable depth of experience and expertise within the organisation developing bespoke custom technologies for the environment, but also technology watch and selecting the best in class solutions and products to achieve specific strategic need within the oil and gas domain.
Do you have like an R&D laboratory someplace where you do that?
There's technology centres all around the world with different expertise, so I won't even try and list them all because it's just crazy, but there'll be a technology centre that has an expertise perhaps in a particular drilling method, another one where we do a lot of software development. This is a Schlumberger statement as opposed to a connectivity aspect, but a lot of software development happens in Cambridge, for example. And we ourselves, for the communications, our Centre of Excellence is in Aberdeen for historical reasons as much as anything. We do develop our own technology, and we're continually enhancing the product, our spacecraft product line to make it smaller, faster, sharper, cheaper. But also even modulation techniques where we actually have our own research program, which are all about delivering a product which is tuned to our environment. We do market watch continually, but we are often disappointed that our niche requirements within oil and gas really are not being addressed by the typical volume manufacturers of satellite equipment. And that forces us to do our own thing. What we try and do is push that product so it becomes mass market over time. And we've got a lot of success stories where we have worked closely with technology companies, satellite manufacturers, to make sure when they're developing their technology that they actually consider our unusual requirements from the ground up and not as an afterthought.
Very good, thank you. A question from the audience? Let me just see if there's somebody else first. Please.
I don't mean to monopolize.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I have a question for Roger, if I may.
Sure.
If I understood what you said, you seem to indicate that if you were looking at the expansion of HDTV versus IPTV, you'd be tending to put your money on the IPTV, if that was more or less an oversimplification of what you said. And I wonder if there's not a psychological barrier there. From my experience, when people shifted and started watching color TV, they never went back to buy a black and white TV. people have gotten spoiled on HDTV, and more are doing it now. IPTV, not yet, is HD. I mean, it's coming, but right now, IPTV is of a lower quality. Do you think you're really going to find that the two have a divergence where IPTV takes off and HDTV slows down? I think they're both going to go.
I don't think HDTV is going to slow down much. I mean, for those of us who know what quality TV looks like, we demand that. I don't watch TV unless it's HDTV because it just looks too bad. There's a whole younger generation that simply doesn't care. One of the issues with IPTV is the consumer is going to have to at some point decide what they want to watch when they want to watch it. Right now with linear TV, it's fed to them. They don't have to make that decision. There are a lot of people that enjoy not making that decision. But from what I've seen, a lot of the research that I've read, the younger generation definitely is more willing to make the decision to find what they want to watch. And they want it when they want it, where they want it. And they're less concerned with quality than convenience. For them, it's more about convenience. Personally, I've got enough books to read, enough children to take care of that it's not high on my priority list. I care about quality, but
I see Bryan wants to say something. I'm real interested because, Bryan, you do have a lot of television
well, we've done a little bit of experience over the past few years, and I just wanted to take issue with one thing. You mentioned that you felt it wasn't ready for HD. I think IPTV
is behind. I didn't say it wasn't ready for it, but right now, maybe I'm wrong, but my impression is it's a bit behind.
I'd say it's ready for prime time. We've got how many channels are we operating today? 40 something. 50. Okay, so we have 50 HDs up today in IP, going all the way to consumers, and they're very well received as the highest quality you can get. So I believe the technology is ready. I think that the ecosystem has taken a lot longer to be ready, and getting all the way through to a set-top, stable, cost-efficient, and competitive from that cost point of view has taken longer than we thought. But the technology, I believe, is tried and true at this point.
I guess I've just compared what I've seen, but I haven't seen the best yet. The best is yet to come.
We've got some good stuff.
Good question. Thank you. I want to kind of pick up on this television quality question and say, what are the trends here and what is the future for advanced HD TV? We're always talking about 3G, 4G, 5G kind of things in the cellular area. So what are the panel's thoughts on a higher resolution, such as 1080p? Somebody explain to me what that is, because it sounds familiar to me. And 3D TV, or any other TV that's more exotic.
I'll talk a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
The 1080p, 1080i is you draw half of the lines, interlace. 1080p is all progressive. Every refresh rate you're drawing all of them. The getting higher resolution than that almost requires bigger rooms and bigger TVs, because you can get the pixels so close to until it doesn't matter anymore. You cram more pixels in there that you and I can't see it. One of the problems with HDTV adoption in Europe is 720p is an HD standard. Europe's got PAL at 625 lines. The living rooms aren't that big. The TVs aren't that big. Going between 625 and 720 there's not enough quality difference to make the push. So trying to go above, trying to increase the resolution above what we've already got makes sense for digital cinema, makes sense for large screens, but when you look at the home market, unless you have very large rooms with a large screen, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So it means a smaller market.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and did you?
Again, I just want to add a different perspective in that most all TV sets being sold today are 1080p. So the equipment that's landing, I mean, there are a few 1080is, and I think Circuit City just sold them in bankruptcy on the floor. So there's very little 1080i in the left of the market being sold. So we're getting mass adoption of 1080p today. So with that, there's an opportunity for broadcasters to launch 1080p 60 frames a second, which is basically double the resolution of the current 1080i signal. There are broadcasters out there that are shooting everything 1080p 60 today, and they're in the process of effectively back converting their whole plant into that technology. So there's tremendous growth for this industry, I believe, in 1080p, and that is also showing itself in advanced HD like 3D, which is again 2 times more, and it takes more cameras, a little higher production value, but you have people like not Spielberg, but some of the DreamWorks animation, for example, that's shooting all of its product today in 3D TV. So you have elements and pockets of production that are happening, and that will only spur demand over time.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, as Bryan said, the 1080p consumer-based product is definitely getting there fast. It's interesting, the over-the-air terrestrial broadcasters are pretty much stuck with 720p and 1080i for the moment. But I think you're seeing a fair amount of, I think, early experience with 1080p on the part of the major satellite providers, and the major cable companies are providing 1080p content to their subscribers. And I think, of course, with Blu-ray being a 1080p medium, I think we're going to see more and more. We've taken a huge step to go from SD-TV to 720p and 1080i HD, and now we're about to take another incremental step, I think, over a longer period of time to go to full 1080p, but it's going to happen.
That's very good. I think this panel is helping us all get clear what these different acronyms stand for and what the prospects are, seeing that the displays that are being sold out there are capable of the 1080p, which is where I've seen it recently because I purchased a display in the last year, and I checked the specs and was informed, make sure you get 1080p, even if the transmission isn't 1080p yet. Questions from the audience?
Well, so I started
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Any question, because I'm not a 3D TV expert. I'm interested in it like a lot of consumers, I think. It was interesting to hear today, Beretta talk about the fact that they think 3D, certainly in the cinema format, is very, very interesting application in Europe. We don't see that, I don't think, or at least I have not seen as much of that here in the U.S. My experience with HD, I'll relate to you and then ask the experts here, whether they see something similar happening with 3D. When I was a young executive at Cable Labs back in the early 90s, sort of 92 time frame, I'm sure many of you went through a similar experience. I saw my first HD TV, big Sony analog HD TV, and I thought, wow, this is a killer application. I looked at that thing and I said, why wouldn't everybody in the world want this? And yet it took 12 to 14 years for that to actually make it, certainly in the U.S. here, and I think similar experience around the world. And my assessment of that and why that happened is because basically HD content, it takes up a lot more bandwidth, obviously, than SD. Multiples, 4, 6, 8 times as much. And the multi-system video providers, such as the cable companies and the satellite companies, couldn't figure a way to make 8 times the amount of money off of that content that they could make off of SD. Back in the sort of 2003, 2004 time frame, I happened to be at a cable show and chatting with folks I know in the cable industry, and they said, this was on the eve of a proposed EchoStar DirecTV merger. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would we do if that actually happened. And they came up with this idea, I think right about that time, that, wow, we think our competitive advantage in cable is local and local AC. It's the satellite companies can't do it. We just didn't think the satellite companies could do it. And we're going to waste a lot of bandwidth doing that, but we have some bandwidth to waste, particularly as we roll out all digital platforms. So let's use that as a competitive advantage. At least DirecTV countered with next generation K-band satellites. This October they'll actually launch their 5th K-band spot-beam satellite, DTV-12, and they've done a fantastic job of countering that both on a national basis and a local basis. But it sort of took that competitive advantage for the operators to believe that there was a business model there. And that was not, wow, let's take 8 times the bandwidth and hope to get, maybe 5 or 10% more revenue out of it. It was, wow, this is a way to make a strong competitive move. Well, when I think about 3D, and obviously I'm not, like Giuliano, interested in wearing glasses, but these autostereoscopic monitors and whatnot that are out today are certainly being developed today, and I think there is a future where we won't have to wear glasses to watch 3D TV. The question I've got is, as you produce that content, and there's all kinds of interest in it, certainly in the gaming world, and certainly on the content side, as you say, what is the motivation, and is there a similar motivation that's described in the U.S. To distribute that content and take up 2 to 4 times the bandwidth? Do you see demand for that? That's my question.
I'll comment and pass it along, but I think that in the multi-channel world, anything that gives you an edge, you're interested in. To the point where you talked about local to local at one time was unique. It was a differentiator. Charlie started doing Dish TV. He started doing 1080p last year because he thought he could differentiate on that basis. He didn't have 1080p 60, so it didn't really take. But I think that 3D HD could definitely be something different. Today, any 1080p set can work with 3D. So that's in fact, this year we've already had three 3D events on our satellites. So it's happening. It's just not broad-based. I mean, the one thing that was broad-based was the commercial during the Super Bowl that we had on. And Intel actually bought 10 million pairs of glasses that they handed out. Most people, I don't think, went over the top participating, but it was cool. Some of these new technologies, and I said at Dolby at CES, are quite compelling. And you could imagine home theaters at least putting these new LED glasses, because they have an active display in them, in your home theater. It could definitely be done. So it all depends on who takes the first shot of the bow. If someone's willing to do it, others will follow.
I mean, that's my question. Is basically the cable companies somewhat ill-advised at first shot back in the sort of.
It won't be cable that takes the first shot here, but I do think DirecTV with new satellites coming out, or EchoStar with new satellites, could definitely be the first shot.
Okay, we need to take.
You mentioned HD and the idea of it taking a long time. I would put out there that I think a big part of that delay was industry standards. And how important do you think industry standards are to uptake of new technology?
Excellent question. Yeah, we'll do that one. Thank you.
We're good.
Okay, so we have the question. Would you go ahead and repeat that, Bryan?
We talked about HD and the length of time it took to develop that technology. I would put out there that a big part of that was getting the industry standard right, and that was going on during the 90s. How important do each of you think that getting an industry standard is on actually adoption of technology?
Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
I think it's critical, because the last thing companies want to do is invest a whole bunch of money in new technology that will give them an edge for a year or two, and then have to replace it all in 3 or 4 years once the standard is. I mean, with these types of large infrastructures, trying to install proprietary equipment for a standard that doesn't exist, for proprietary signals, doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to, if they do that, they've got to make sure their vendors continue to stay in business, to continue to support legacy hardware that is no longer mainstream for years to come. And you need the standard. You absolutely need the standard to have the technology adopted quickly.
So I'd suggest there's actually some balance required. I mean, standards are very, very important, but equally standards can be quite stifling with respect to innovation. And there needs to be room within the marketplace for early adopters and for aggressive organisations to push out non-standard equipment. And the understanding that those early adopters may get burned and junk it. I mean, I bought HD DVD. I thought that was really clever at the time, but it's just covered in dust now. I wish it got Blu-ray. So with hindsight, I made a mistake, but I wanted HD fast in my house. I wanted to watch it now. I didn't want to wait. So I understood that there was a risk there that maybe backing the wrong horse would prove true. But I wouldn't stop doing it again. But I believe balance is very important. Standards are critical. The standards also develop out of innovation, where that innovation becomes accepted and becomes standardized and then adopted by the larger market.
That's wisdom.
It can't take years and years to develop a standard. It's good point. We did shorten that process.
Dave, over there, you mentioned VS2. I'd like your to comment on why you thought that was a good standard.
Standards are definitely critical. And there is a balance, there needs to be a balance. And from a service provider perspective, where we don't manufacture our own equipment, but we rely on manufacturers to adopt the standards and produce the hardware that's going to uphold those standards. So folks like us can make a buck to provide the service based on that equipment with those standards. One of the things that we're running into, this is our fifth syndication season of providing HD distribution for third-party vendors. And one of the things that we're still running into today is the GlobeCast standards. There seems to be so many of them, and every year there's another piece of consumer equipment that comes out that, well, now it's not the 5.1 channel anymore. It's surround, and it's Dolby E, and it's Dolby Digital, and it's Dolby something, and they're always getting their hopefully nobody's in the audience for Dolby. They're always getting their good pay. But I mean, from our perspective, as a service provider, standards are definitely critical, because you can't provide a service without knowing that this is the standard on the uplink side or the distribution side, and this is a different standard on the receive side. And we've run into those situations before as well. Being in our fifth season of syndication season with HD distribution, we launched a company wanted to get this HD product out very rapidly, but yet we have to use someone else's third-party HD receiver because the manufacturer of the encoders didn't have the receivers. And it was it's critical to follow the standards and to have an end-to-end product as well.
You want to see the actual product, not just the standard in a document. Yes, ma'am.
From the manufacturing side, the new technologies that Bryan was mentioning that are coming along, depends on the availability of widespread availability of low-cost silicon ICs, and they're not going to happen unless they're developed hand-in-hand with the standards bodies and the standardization. A lot of those companies are involved in development of standards. So standardization and development of standards is critical, because that drives the ICs, which drive the cost down to make these things possible.
I'm glad you mentioned the ICs. I remember a few years ago in a class I was teaching at UCLA, there was a student there who worked for a company that made chips. And he said that we've adopted a new standard called DVB-S2, and that's the first time I heard of it, because it hadn't been really publicized. And he handed me the document. I looked at it and I said, wow, this performance is amazing. This is going to make it possible to transmit 1080p and all of that. And but no product was out yet, and they were producing a chipset. Now today, Dave, what would you say is the penetration from DVB-S2? You haven't asked anybody else if they have an idea.
It's not huge at this point. It's very broadcaster based and professional level. We are attempting to push in North America a DTH marketplace for, obviously, we're in a niche market with ethnic content to expats in the U.S. And we're finding yet another niche inside the niche, which is even smaller, of those that would want potentially HD programming, DVB-S2 delivery, MPEG-4 encoding. So it's, again, to answer your question, what's the penetration? It's very small.
Okay, well, now there's another area where S2 is coming, and that's in the ViaSat marketplace. And so possibly, Andy, you've come across DVB-S2 or?
DVB-S2, yes, in terms of, doing tests and assessing equipment, but not in terms of deployment.
You haven't moved in that direction?
No.
Okay.
I just take
go
a
ahead.
comment. I'd say that it's bigger than you think. That at least say 10% of our fleet has DVB-S2 implemented on it. So it's and while it's still new to many customers, I'd say that it's catching on very quickly, and it's also enabling, it's unleashing some of these new technologies we're talking about, whether it be HD or advanced HD on the video side, and certainly extra throughput on the data side.
You came along at the right time.
Yeah.
That's another part of it, is the timing out there. Any other comments? Okay, questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
I'll say it from Szelag, United Arab Emirates. I'm wondering how big is the existing market for the file-based content delivery, and what is being deployed, and who is playing what role in this industry, like who's doing what, and is it used in satellite only or is being used in terrestrial as well?
Sounds like my question. A lot of questions there. I'll try to remember them all, and please, if I don't, ask them again. To what extent is file-based content delivery being used? I would say it's just starting. Professional broadcasters and private networks are just now getting comfortable with the reliability of the networks, and it's more than just adding a hard drive to a receiving device. You must have all of the control mechanism and the management of the network to go along with it. So, widely deployed at this point, I would say no. There are several networks out there with thousands of receive locations. The majority of the networks that we have been involved with in our company have been satellite-based, but we do have a combination of satellite and terrestrial hybrid networks, internet IP-based networks as well, and a combination of the two. How big is the market? I think it's still to be determined. I think ultimately every broadcast network will have some need for a file-based subsystem, either for the main delivery or delivery of more and more channels where the content is so repetitive that it just simply does not make sense to do it in a linear, real-time basis. But it's best done by trickle-feeding content. If you have 3-hour blocks and it's the same block over and over in just different time zones, it's very efficient to trickle-feed this content at slower than real-time on the satellite and then play it out on the hard drive.
Do you see much competition coming from the terrestrial internet in achieving that mode?
Yeah, there's competition. I mean, everybody. This is not a new idea per se. We're seeing all kinds of companies getting into file-based delivery, from the mom-and-pop garage operations all the way to the biggest companies in our industry. And you see it, especially when you talk about digital signage. There's a big buzzword about digital signage. What does that mean? It means replacing paper signs with real-time content delivered electronically. And this is a very young emerging market that is perfect for file-based delivery.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that question. Here in front.
Hi, Brendan Murray with Futron Corporation. Any question? I wanted to ask specifically about adopting technologies that have compression technologies. And I'm wondering how much of the existing satellite capacity constraints are causing any kind of restriction on that kind of adoption, especially when you're trying to support the legacy systems, but at the same time trying to introduce the new system in order to get better efficiency out of the satellite capacity. Is satellite capacity causing a hindrance to that right now, or are they being done in tandem without too much difficulty?
I'll take a shot at that first.
Go right ahead, Dave.
From a service provider perspective, I mean, what really drives one of our decision-making processes is the ROI. If we have to go to more capacity, What does that cost? Obviously, doing business in the satellite industry, that's the first largest expense of running your business from a service provider perspective. We don't own the spacecraft, and Bryan just doesn't want to reduce his margins. And we don't want to. We all have to make a dollar.
I'm glad you don't want me to.
Christians go. We all have to stay in business. We all have to make a dollar, and we want our vendors to be profitable and to invest in that next generation. But it is a balancing act, I guess. Do you go for more capacity, or do you try to invest on the side of the encoding and more compression, modulation? So that's where we're at right now. Is ABC and DVB-S2. To take a more efficient use of the bandwidth that we have right now before we make that next step to another committed transponder or two.
I'd add to that. There's more to it than just cost or self-interest of the satellite operator versus the customer. It's really what works best for the customer. At the end of the day, satellite is a small component of the costs of running a network. So when they consider upgrading to new compression or new technology, they have to take into account the number of sites, the risk to their network, and the risk to the transmission of that network. So different networks come out at different places in that equation. And often the last mile has tens of thousands of these decoders that you have to replace. So that math actually will overcome the cost of space segment many, many times. So it works out differently for different applications. But in general, we try to do what's best for our customers.
I guess I wasn't even asking from a cost perspective. I was just, I'll take that perhaps it's a misconception that there's not enough capacity to support that kind of dual illumination.
That hasn't been a gating factor to date. It's a challenge, but it certainly can be overcome.
Very good. I have one last question for each of you to consider here as we wrap up, and that is, what are the good indicators that a new technology will be adopted and key to this is and provide satisfactory business results? Okay, so maybe Tom, if we could start with you. Are you ready to shoot on that one?
Sure. It's a good question. I think obviously word of mouth buzz is critical. I think any of the kinds of things that we do, certainly in the consumer space, I think that's pretty important. About 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe, I had a meeting with John Berlone, who was the CEO of TCI at the time, and he said to me, if you have something that doesn't sell itself, then it's probably not the right product. I think that's overstated, but he didn't believe a lot in marketing. But to some degree, I think when you have a new technology, you have a new idea, you have a new service, you know pretty early on, because early adopters are either your best advocates or they basically will kill you. And it's their role in life. They do a lot of research, and they either love you or they hate you. And if they love you, it's great. It's a great springboard. If they hate you, it's almost impossible to get over that. One of the things that we always talk a lot about at Wild Blue, and we talk a lot about it at the ViaSat 1, and that is, as we're creating the service, are we proud? Would we be proud to sell that service to the most important person in our lives? I call it the significant other test. Not give it to them, not sort of let them demo it for free, but actually sell it at retail price to them. And if anybody's working on a service that doesn't feel like that's what they're creating, then we're probably not creating something of any value. And so, not that your significant other is an early adopter, maybe they're not, but I think that's a good metric or a good measure of whether you're creating something that's interesting. So early adopter buzz, I think, is pretty darn critical. In the early days of satellite broadband on the Wild Blue blue system, and got all kinds of incredible emails from people that said, you know, if I didn't have this service, I wouldn't be able to live where I live. I wouldn't be able to be a computer programmer out at, you know, the edge of the national forest, et cetera, et cetera. And there was all kinds of buzz around it. And, you know, I think we see similar things going on right now in the satellite industry around ViaSat 1, you know, in the next couple of years. Obviously, we hope that translates into the consumer industry as well, but or the consumer segment. So I don't know if that helps. But
no, that's very good. In fact, very quickly, I was one of the beta testers of DirecTV since I was with Hughes Communications, and I moved to a different division. So I actually had to give the equipment back. And it wasn't 6 months later, my wife said, "Can we subscribe to DirecTV?" So that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Very much.
It impressed me. I really was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, the other, obviously, very, very dramatic example is VCR. You know, when you think about a hard drive, and everybody's had a VCR forever before a DVR, and you know, you could talk about it, you could think about it, it just didn't seem compelling. And yet, the most vocal advocates were the people that had it. And you couldn't go to a cocktail party, you couldn't go to a conference or anywhere else where people wouldn't say, "This is the coolest thing. You wouldn't believe how this will transform the way you watch television." I mean, you can't get that kind of buzz, you know, from advertising. You could advertise all day long and never get that kind of buzz.
Sorry.
So that's.
Can I add one?
Yeah, we just have time.
Just one comment here. Just having rolled out a lot of technology and being an arrow in the back kind of a guy. I would make sure that it works. Whatever technology you're rolling out has to be tried and true and working. You can't just say, "I promise it'll work in 6 months," because you're dead. I think the actual established performance is important.
That's wisdom. Well, we've come to the end here, and I want to thank the panelists for the superb job of sharing their wisdom and their ideas and their predictions. And thank the audience also. Appreciate you all being here and asking questions. So come on back after the break.
Where do you want to go?